All right, we start with a Fox News alert. There is absolutely zero evidence that President Trump ever colluded with Russia in any way, shape, manner, or form. And now Robert Mueller's merry band of Trump-hating Democratic sycophants are completely and totally desperate to find anything, something on President Trump. Now, late last night, the New York Times released a report allegedly detailing questions that Robert Mueller wants to ask Trump before the investigation concludes. If any of these leaked questions are true, be warned. Mueller is laying a huge perjury trap for the president of the United States, which means two things. One, he has nothing. And two, it proves everything I've been saying about him and Andrew Weissman and company. Two of America's top attorneys are now sounding the alarm. Watch this.
The questions are very inartfully drawn. They are written as open-ended questions. They're not cross-examination questions. They're not sharp questions designed to confront and test. They're really designed to let him ramble and talk. And I suspect that's the strategy of the special counsel, because they know that may be President Trump's weakness. If they were to ask him direct, tough questions to which he can answer yes or no, that might not give them the advantage they're seeking.
The questions are an intrusion into the president's Article 2 powers under the Constitution to fire any executive branch employee. To ask questions, as Mr. Mueller apparently proposes to do, about what the president was thinking when he fired Comey or Flynn or anybody else is an outrageous, sophomoric, juvenile intrusion into the president's unfettered power to fire anyone in the executive branch. It is a symptom of how ridiculous this appointment was by Rod Rosenstein when he made the appointment with no evidence of a crime.
Joe DeGeneva, Alan Dershowitz are exactly right. This is a perjury trap for the president of the United States, and even more frightening are the contents of this inquiry. Now, note all the questions that include the term, what did the president think? What did the president think about James Comey? What does the president think about Jeff Sessions' recusal? What does the president think about the special counsel? Well, I have a question for Robert Mueller tonight. When did thinking or thoughts ever become a crime? When did the United States start regulating what may or may not be in a person's mind? Are we now going to criminalize thoughts? This list of insane, juvenile, ridiculous questions goes on, including one question about a statement to our friend Maria Bartiromo, the president's reaction to news reports and what discussions Trump had about terminating the special counsel. Excuse me, he never terminated him. And again, more questions about the president's thought process. Now, remember, this is originally was supposed to be about Russia collusion, an investigation, not some persecution of the president on ridiculous thought patterns. Rush Limbaugh captured it well today. He said the president should only agree to a Mueller interview if, in fact, President Trump gets the Hillary Clinton treatment. Let's take a look.
If Trump could secure the same identical circumstances that were granted to Hillary Clinton, then why not sit down for the interview and answer the questions? But, of course, I speak facetiously because everybody knows that Donald Trump is not going to get the Hillary Clinton treatment extended by James Comey.
You know, not under oath, not recorded, pretty much meaningless. Send in a pro-Trump person like Peter Strzok interviewed Hillary. You know, that's right. If we have a fair system of justice, President Trump should absolutely get the Hillary treatment for any interview with the FBI. And just like Hillary Clinton's interview, after the exoneration was written months later, well, Trump's interview should be conducted not under oath, not recorded, not be transcribed, and the exoneration written months in advance. And oh, yeah, someone with a pro-Trump bias, let's say me, I'll conduct the questioning. Now, if Hillary Clinton, how about Rush or the great one, Mark Levin? Good idea. Now, if she gets the Clinton treatment, anti-Trump FBI agent Peter Strzok for the interview, maybe, I don't know, we have a good choice of people. Lots of conservatives that can interview him. All right, none of this is ever going to happen. We know that. We now know, sadly, in America, we have a two-tier justice system. We don't have equal justice under the law, equal application of our laws. While the president is targeted in a totally off-the-rails witch hunt, Hillary Clinton, James Comey, Andrew McCabe, all these other deep state actors have never been charged with a crime, despite mountains of evidence that we have. For example, despite her total exoneration from the FBI, our friend, Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett, who will join us tonight, he has revealed multiple serious crimes that Hillary Clinton should be charged with, starting with 18 U.S.C. 793, mishandling, destroying classified documents, 18 U.S.C. 1505, the obstruction of justice. You remember BleachBit, deleted emails, busting up devices. No charges over the multiple crimes related to her campaign's shady practices surrounding the Steele dossier. Next up, let's look at James Comey. Well, he's not under any criminal investigation as of now. Shouldn't he at least face scrutiny over 18 U.S.C. 641, the theft of government property or records after he took his Trump memos outside of the FBI? What about 18 U.S.C. 1924, the mishandling of classified information? And remember, when James Comey lied to Congress about not signing off on Clinton's exoneration letter months before that interview took place, that's against the law. 18 U.S.C. 1621. And we got Andrew McCabe. House Republicans have now referred McCabe, as did the IG, for multiple crimes over lying to the FBI. And McCabe was fired for lying to the FBI. Let's see. Oh, General Flynn. Why hasn't he been charged with a crime in this case? Now, of course, don't hold your breath for an investigation into Loretta Lynch, Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, or any of these other anti-Trump deep state actors. Now, what's behind this, sadly, in the United States of America today is a two-tiered system of justice. It is simple. The deep state hates who you chose to be your president. They are hell-bent on seeing Donald Trump delegitimized and hopefully on their side removed from office. Obviously, that means they don't want him to succeed. And that would mean even if Americans suffer in the process. Now, breaking this week, a group of wealthy secret donors, get this, they poured as much as $50 million into an investigation of President Trump after his 2016 election, based on the dossier. Now, this is in the House Intel Committee report. Get this. These top secret anti-Trump donors even utilized the services of Christopher Steele, the foreign national, the author of the dirty dossier that we now know was filled with Russian lies. Now, without a doubt, this deep state is conducting a full-scale political attempt to take down this president. And perhaps the most pathetic deep state actor of all, James Comey, well, the guy that refused to come on this show, I offered him 4 hours of airtime. He's continuing his anti-Trump book tour, and he's actually claiming that Trump's criticism of the deep state is dangerous for the country. How dare he? How dare he be honest? No president has faced this before. Now, Comey also took some time to fantasize about what if the deep state's choice, his choice, when in fact he exonerated Hillary Clinton when he knew she committed crimes and wrote the exoneration before investigation. But he's thinking, but what if Hillary had actually won? Take a look.
What would your life be like if she'd won?
I also don't know the answer to that. I think I would still be the FBI director. And the reason I say that is, someone asked me to compare the two, and it's too hard for me to compare the two, except Secretary Clinton is someone deeply enmeshed in the rule of law, respect for institutions, a lawyer. And so given that background, I'm reasonably confident that even though she was unhappy with decisions the FBI had made, she would not fire the FBI director as a result. But look, again, I don't know that for sure.
No, I don't even think she would have kept you around. Now, let's turn to another anti-Trump actor, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Now, the Freedom Caucus chairman, Mark Meadows, who's been on this show a lot, along with several other House Republicans, they have drafted articles of impeachment against Rosenstein over the extremely slow release or just flat-out obstruction regarding subpoenaed documents related to the Clinton email investigation and, of course, the dossier and FISA abuse and the Russia investigation. Now, today, Rosenstein fired back, trashing Congress. Congress has a constitutional duty and authority of oversight, Mr. Rosenstein. I would think you read that in your Constitution. Take a look.
They can't even resist leaking their own drafts.
Would you care to elaborate on that?
I saw that draft. I mean, I don't know who wrote it. There have been people who have been making threats privately and publicly against me for quite some time. And I think they should understand by now the Department of Justice is not going to be extorted. We're going to do what's required by the rule of law, and any kind of threats that anybody makes are not going to affect the way we do our job.
And Congress is going to do their constitutional job and demand you hand over the documents they have subpoenaed a long time ago. Congressman Meadows responding on Twitter, writing, if he believes being asked to do his job is extortion, then Rod Rosenstein should step aside and allow us to find a new deputy attorney general, preferably one who is interested in transparency. And I'll add also the law. Now, also breaking tonight, Chairman Bob Goodlatte, Chairman Gowdy, they're requesting more information from the Justice Department surrounding fired FBI Director Comey's friend, Daniel Richman. He's the guy who used his special designation in the FBI to leak information to the press, which, of course, we know Comey wanted. Is Rosenstein going to cooperate on this one? I'm not holding my breath. Now, next up, we have yet even more examples to bring you from the abusively biased press in this country and their age-old tactic called bias by omission. And according to a report from Newsbusters tonight, on Monday, network news broadcasts, ABC, CBS, NBC, guess what? They completely failed to mention South Korean's President Moon suggested Donald Trump should win the Nobel Peace Prize. They never mentioned it. In fact, according to Newsbusters, the only mention of a Nobel Peace Prize was used by ABC and NBC to mock Trump supporters who started chanting in Michigan, Nobel, Nobel, during his rally over the weekend. And while the media is not ignoring Trump's serious progress on the world stage, which they always do, they're mourning the tragic plight of the caravan of migrants at our southern border that want to enter this country illegally, that don't respect our sovereignty. Take a look.
Crisis at the border. A caravan with more than 100 migrants seeking asylum arriving at the U.S. border with Mexico, but told there's no room.
And this is literally the end of the road for these migrants. You can see them camped out here by the dozens against the morning chill. They are literally sleeping up against the border terminal.
Border showdown. The standoff escalates over that caravan of migrants from Central America. Denounced by the president, they're now at the U.S. border. Will they be turned away?
A caravan of Central American migrants traveling for more than a month is at the U.S.-Mexico border trying to cross. U.S. officials are trying to keep the group of nearly 200 people out. They want asylum, but have not been allowed to start the application process.
Now, what the media is failing to emphasize is the Department of Justice has filed criminal illegal entry charges to 11 members of this caravan, including one felony charge to a person who was previously deported. Now, many of these migrants scaled the border fence in California, look at that, after making their way from Central America unabated through Mexico. Mexico that routinely throws people out or throws them in prison if they enter illegally from El Salvador, Nicaragua, or Central America. These images you're watching, the wall climbing, the attempt to illegally cross the border, is a clear and obvious indication of how many of these migrants value our laws, respect our sovereignty. And what's worse, Mexico's total inaction. It shows what kind of so-called ally we're dealing with south of the border.
Byron York is chief political correspondent at the Washington Examiner. Tom Fitton is president of Judicial Watch. They join us both tonight. Tom, first to you. You read these questions. Your reaction was what?
Well, you have to wonder what Mueller's up to here. Is he acting as a special counsel? You read these questions, you might be curious as to the answers if you were a journalist or a politician trying to attack Donald Trump. But for a prosecutor to be putting out questions like this and to demand the time of the President of the United States is an abuse of his power. And Mueller's just wandering around, bumping into walls, investigatively speaking. There's not much here in the way of Russia collusion. Asking his opinions and questions about his tweets, to me, is a waste of time and the president's time. And I can't imagine a judge is going to allow him to force the president to have to answer many of these questions, since they're so off kilter from any legitimate legal analysis or legal prosecution that he might be able to bring.
Well, they're confusing at the very least to non-lawyers like me looking at this. Byron, do they suggest a direction? What do they tell us? Assuming they're real, about the direction of this investigation?
Well, first of all, it's not just a group of 40-something questions. It's a potentially unlimited number of questions. When they say, well, when did you first find out about that June 2016 meeting in Trump Tower? Doesn't that naturally lead to who told you? What did they say the purpose was? How many people were involved? Did they tell you what happened? I mean, each question, which seems kind of benign and open-ended, can lead to all sorts of additional questions. But I think what you were getting at in your introduction is a point that we've seen a lot, which is asking Trump's motivations for the perfectly normal actions of a president. We've seen that in other court cases, from the travel ban to DACA to other things, in which the legitimate exercise of presidential power is questioned because the president apparently had some sort of unacceptable motive, and that's what's involved.
So that's a theological debate, not a political or policy debate. Are you pure-hearted? That's not really the concern of federal prosecutors, is it?
Right. Well, that's because everybody knows that he had the power to fire the director of the FBI, or he has the power to rake his attorney general over the coals. Whether or not that's a good idea is completely separate. The question here with Comey seems to be, what was your state of mind when you were doing that? If you did that with a pure intention, okay by me, but if you did it with a bad intention, you could be in deep trouble.
Are you Martin Luther? I mean, this is like bizarre for a secular government to pursue that line of questioning. So
Mueller's even asking about, what did you think of my appointment? What was your reaction to my appointment? He's asking about himself.
This is like a Playboy questionnaire. What are your greatest strengths? What are your turnoffs?
You know what? Go ahead.
It's bizarre. But does it tell us? I mean, I think the key question is this investigation moving in the direction from which it started, which is an investigation into collusion, purportedly, with the Russian government during the campaign? Do you get that sense from these questions?
I just see this as the kind of the fantasy list of Fusion GPS, Adam Schiff type questions. They're pushing that narrative that's been out there. And you look at this and you got to wonder, forget about the FISA court misusing this dossier or being led to misuse this dossier. It looks to me like Mueller is using this dossier as the basis for a lot of these vague questions on Russia, his business dealings in Russia, and just taking this, as I said, this anti-Trump media narrative and bringing it into the prosecutorial function of the Justice Department. It's a real abuse, and Rod Rosenstein needs to be held accountable for unleashing this on the American people, the presidency, and the Justice Department.
Hard to see how it's made the country better. Is it, I haven't checked, Byron, you're very current with the law, is it a crime to say sympathetic things toward Russia?
As far as I know, absolutely not. Okay. So this list of questions, I have to say I completely lost my train of thought on this.
Does it seem like this is moving, however, toward what we were promised at the outset, which is an examination of whether Russia played a significant role in our election?
The thing to remember about this is there's not a whole lot new in these questions. When you look at some of the areas, Michael Flynn, Comey, Sessions, and collusion, it doesn't indicate that Mueller has come up with some completely new area of inquiry that we didn't know about before. Actually, this is pretty much what we have been talking about for the last year or so. So from that point, it seems to me that the Trump people should be somewhat relieved in the sense that we seem to know everything that he is talking about.
It sounds like a Morning Joe segment. I mean, I've totally lost interest. I don't, you know what I mean? Like Carter Page was not subverting democracy. I just don't, you haven't convinced me.
Well, the House Intelligence Committee found the other day that there was no evidence of collusion. And there's nothing in this list of questions to suggest that Mueller has info that the House Intelligence Committee didn't.
They were covering up for Vladimir Putin. Well, okay, just so you know. Gentlemen, thank you.
You're welcome
for that. Why are you criticizing Jim Comey and Andrew McCabe? If a friend asked you that question, it wouldn't be hard to answer. Comey was the shiftiest, most political FBI director in memory. His deputy, Andy McCabe, repeatedly lied to federal investigators. You try that, you'd wind up in jail. So why criticize these guys? Because they deserve it. But let's say a federal prosecutor asked you the very same question using this language, quote, what is the reason for your continued criticism of Mr. Comey and his former deputy, Andrew G. McCabe? See how the tone is different there? Suddenly, it's ominous. It sounds more like a threat than a question. What's the point of asking that, you might wonder? Since when is criticizing FBI officials a crime in this country? Well, apparently since Robert Mueller became special counsel. According to the New York Times, that's one of more than 40 questions Mueller plans to ask the president under penalty of perjury. Here's another one. Quote, what was your opinion of Mr. Comey during the transition? Huh? Your opinion? Whose business is that? Aren't Americans allowed to have any opinion they want without being grilled by law enforcement about it? And then there's this question, quote, what was the purpose of your July 2017 criticism of Mr. Sessions? Again, criticism of a government official framed as a crime, as if dissenting views aren't allowed or must be justified to a prosecutor. What country is this anyway? In fact, the president is allowed to have any opinion he wants of anyone who works for him. That is true of all presidents. They get to hire and fire their own appointees for their own reasons. If you don't like it, don't vote for them. This is a democracy. Trump got elected. Mueller didn't. Presidents also get to formulate their own policies. Voters can decide whether they agree with those policies. Again, that's why we have elections. Yet here are two more Mueller questions. Listen to these. Quote, what discussions did you have during the campaign regarding Russian sanctions? And, quote, what involvement did you have concerning 2016 Republican platform changes regarding arming Ukraine? So let's review. Trump ran for office promising to improve our relationship with Russia. He said that frequently and in public. Voters heard it, they agreed with him, and he won. But permanent Washington hated the idea of getting closer to Russia. They've been pushing a war with Iran for years. That's obvious now. Closer ties with Russia would make an Iran war far more complicated. Putin had to be the archvillain, the most evil man in the world. Never mind China or Mexico or other countries whose behavior is actually hurting the United States. Russia needed to be our enemy, a country with an economy the size of Texas that can't make a working escalator. They needed to be evil, no matter what voters said they wanted. And so that happened. The policies that Trump ran on are now considered evidence of a crime. America is that much closer to war with Iran. Mission accomplished.
If we want to know who leaked the special counsel's long list of questions for the president, we need to ask, who stands to most to gain? Well, the former assistant to Bob Mueller blamed President Trump for the leak. But Trump blasted the leak himself in a tweet earlier today. A report in the Washington Post tonight, though, suggests that the leaked list may be a series of questions compiled by Trump attorney Jay Sekulow. It may have actually been a list of questions that the president's legal team believed Trump would be asked, kind of a moot court situation. Let's ask two top legal minds why they think the list was leaked. Former U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Joe DeGeneva, and former Whitewater Deputy Independent Counsel, Saul Weisenberg. Joe, let's start with you. I mean, the intrigue about who leaked what and who has motive. I mean, it's like Columbo here, Joe. But
I actually don't care who leaked it. Yeah. I think what's important is that these are clearly the types of questions that have been discussed between the president's team and Mr. Mueller. And the question is, what do these questions say? They say that the investigation is now lurching into territory protected by the constitutional privileges of the President of the United States, and that if Mueller, let's assume these questions are accurate, that this is what Mueller wants to ask. If they are, and if he insists on answers and will not accept written answers and demands an interview, which the President rejects, and then Mueller insists on a subpoena, we are headed to a constitutional crisis because the president's not going to answer these questions under any set of circumstances.
Saul, when I saw tonight this report in the Washington Post about the presidential subpoena, you know, it takes kind of a lot to shock me these days in Washington, but I took a couple of extra breaths there. Your reaction?
I'm not sure I saw the Post thing. Is there a presidential? Is the subpoena already issued to the president?
No, it's just apparently Mueller raised the possibility with the Trump legal team reportedly.
Well, I think Joe is absolutely right. If President Trump decides not to sit in for an interview and answer these questions, and these are very broad questions that definitely raise issues of both executive privilege and separation of powers, if he declines to answer and Mueller issues a subpoena, you know, it's not just a question of does Trump invoke the Fifth Amendment or go to the grand jury. He's going to go and litigate this issue. And here's something that is very interesting that I don't believe anybody has talked about. Remember in the Watergate years, you had U.S. versus Nixon, where the Supreme Court rejected President Nixon's blanket claims of executive privilege. But in that decision, they pointed out that Leon Jaworski, the special counsel, had been explicitly granted the power to contest executive privilege. I'm not sure Bob Mueller has the power under his appointment from Rod Rosenstein or under the regulation to go in and even challenge executive privilege. So there's a possible third way for the president to bottle this up in court on the executive privilege issue.
Oh, I love that. Joe, that's fascinating. Any particular questions in this lengthy list jumped out at you, and why?
Yes, the questions putatively posed by Mueller about what were you thinking when you fired Comey? What were you thinking when you fired Flynn? The notion that a special counsel can intrude on the thinking process of a sitting president while he was president, firing a person that you have ultimate authority, unfettered, unreviewable authority to fire under the Constitution, tells me one thing about Mueller. He has gone goofy. The question should not be answered under any set of circumstances. And I tell you something, I would litigate this to a fare thee well. These questions are sophomoric.
Saul, any particular questions that you have in mind that would be especially problematic for this president to answer? I mean, I wouldn't, as a lawyer, I would not recommend that he do this interview under any circumstances. I didn't think so before, and I certainly don't think so now. Maybe some written answers, like, but I mean, maybe a poetry or a haiku I'd send back to Mueller. But at this point, I wouldn't be engaging with that group.
Two, I agree with you. I didn't think he should go in before. Two, that, I mean, you could pick any number of them. That two that struck me as particularly outrageous or almost humorous. One, why do you continue to criticize Jim Comey and Andrew McCabe? I mean, give me a break. You need to ask that. That's rather obvious. And another one was, why did you hold, Jeff Sessions, Attorney General Sessions' resignation in abeyance, I think until May 31st, and who did you discuss it with? Again, as Joe points out, this goes into the heart of executive decision-making. But it also shows something else. These questions show a couple of things. The Mueller people are outraged and livid at the president's criticisms of them, and they have a very dangerously broad view of obstruction of justice.
Joe and Saul, I want to play for you now a soundbite from Rod Rosenstein today. He was at an event, and he was reacting to what he had heard and been reported about the Freedom Caucus potentially drawing up articles of impeachment against Rosenstein. This is what he said.
They can't even resist leaking their own drafts. I just don't have anything to say about documents like that, that nobody has the courage to put their name on, and that they leak in that way. But I can tell you, there have been people who have been making threats privately and publicly against me for quite some time. And I think they should understand by now the Department of Justice is not going to be extorted.
Joe.
Well, I think Mr. Rosenstein has just shown his ignorance of the Constitution. Congress has demanded access to documents that it's entitled to under the Constitution pursuant to its oversight function. His refusal and obstructionism to turn over those documents has led to the confrontation, which is why they are considering his impeachment. If he thinks that's extortion, I suggest that he resign from office because he's clearly a legal incompetent.
Yeah, Meadows is suggesting that basically today, Saul, that, I mean, this whole extortion.
That's ridiculous.
This extortion line. I mean, it's as the Deputy Attorney General to throw around the word extortion when you're already, under a cloud of concern at the very least because of some of the makeup of the prosecutors, what's happened with the text messages, the failure to turn over documents.
The prosecutors. He didn't pick the prosecutors. I mean, Rod Rosenstein
I'm talking about over the investigation, and in a prickly, it was like a Comey-esque, priggish, prickly manner to go, well, I can't believe it. I mean, it just looked undignified. It was very undignified.
What you see is a man
Please don't defame Rod by comparing him to Comey. Look, you've had these fights. What is it? You think it's okay for Trump to claim executive privilege vis-a-vis Mueller, but it's not okay for Rosenstein to resist Congress? That's been going on since Hector was a pup, and you know it. It's a back and forth.
I don't have any problem with. He can resist Congress, but he cannot refuse to turn over documents that Congress has a right to see. But here's the point. That use of the word extortion today was an absolute outrage on the part of a constitutional officer who is the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. That is unbecoming, and it's a fireable offense. He's not going to be fired because the president shouldn't do it.
Joe, you think everything's an outrage. Everything outrageous.
Actually, that's not true, Saul. And in fact, when the Deputy Attorney General of the United States uses the word extortion for Congress seeking documents it's entitled to under oversight, that is outrageous.
Yeah, so all I'll say is, look, the only reason they ever turned over the only reason they ever turned over the documents is because they were about to be slapped with contempt of Congress. That they had to go to that level to get the documents that they're entitled to get under their normal constitutional oversight obligation. It's their obligation.
Rod's going to get what he wanted. Rod wanted to fight. He's going to get it.
You know what? The president actually is higher up than Rod Rosenstein. It's an amazing thing in our system of government. At any time in the last 6 months, the president could have picked up the phone and told Rod Rosenstein,
we get it.
Instead of tweeting. No, not fired him. He could have said, Rod, turn that stuff over, and then Rod could have either said,
that would have worked well.
No, he's been told.
Oh, come on.
He's been told.
That's ridiculous.
President has been told he cannot communicate with the Justice Department by Don McGahn, the White House counsel.
We're out of town. We're going to run to black. We're going to run to black.
I don't care what Don McGahn does. He's obviously not helping the president.
Guys, thank you both. You're right. He would have been creamed politically and PR-wise by the press and so forth, and he was advised not to do that.